Well, I just reread the email that you sent me, and
Okay.
it was an excellent email. I really enjoyed hearing your story. I don't know if we'll post this. We usually decide after we, decide if, how productive the conversation was. But why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, and you can repeat some of the stuff you had in the email if you want to.
So I'd like to do the introduction like in two parts. So
Okay,
first why I emailed you, and then second about my background.
perfect.
It's a little different. So yeah, I've been following Jordan Peterson now for like 2 years, and your channel, I think now for about 18 months since your first commentary on the biblical lectures.
Okay, that's only about a year ago. So
Really?
yeah.
Oh, no, my memory is a bit fudgy, but yeah. So I've been living like the Petersonian way for now about 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and really taking up what he says, like taking personal responsibility and cleaning up your act, cleaning up your room, speak the truth or at least don't lie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how much my life has changed in these past 2 years. It's almost unbelievable to me, and I've been really trying to live like he says, like as if God exists, and that's the part I'm starting to struggle with, and that's why I wrote to you, because I really enjoyed your commentary on the lectures and your insights, and it adds another layer to what he's already saying. And I've been as I said in email, I've been an atheist since I was 5 years old. I'm 26 now, and my mind has always worked that way. I've never and didn't grow up with religion. Grew up secular. My family is all non-religious, and when he started doing his biblical lectures, I've never been fascinated by something as much as those lectures, and it's so strange to me because I never believed anything of it. I always thought it was like a joke. How could anyone believe this? And then he started like taking these stories apart, and he blew my mind. It was I have a hard time putting it into words, like how it fascinates me. And I was like in a 3-month hiatus between semesters, and I was during the time of his biblical lectures, and I was thinking like, I can play video games all day, or I could really take the time and study this. So he did already. I believe he did already like 5 lectures or so. So I started with the first one, started making notes, writing essays. So that's what I did like for 3 months, and yeah, I thought it was really unbelievable, and that's why I said that. There's one part of me that says like it's all a joke. It's all made up. It can't be real. And then there's this part of me that says no, there's something to it. And these two worldviews, I can't mix them together, and that's why I said I'm really struggling with living as if God exists, because it isn't enough for me. I really want to believe, but I feel like living as an atheist for 21 years, as if something is broken within me that I just can't believe. And I see no signs, I feel nothing, I have no religious experiences, and then I'm very hesitant and a bit afraid of like trying psychedelics, for example. And then I'm constantly conflicted in these two worlds, and it frustrates me because I want to, and somehow I can't. So that's why I want to talk to you. I think the best way to put it is like looking for some religious guidance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Have
And
you tried going to church at all?
no, I'm also quite scared of that because I wrote to you in email. I was baptized because my father wished so. I did go to a Christian to primary school, but I live in my neighborhood. There's a lot of Muslim immigrants, and the number of primary schools is fairly limited. So there were a lot of Muslim kids in my school, and like the Christian aspect of the teachings there wasn't really much attention to it. So only like Christmas and Easter, and that was pretty much it. So I was secular all my life, and even through high school and college. And I was 24 years old when I first started hearing someone like talk about it, like Jordan Peterson, and I really felt I missed out all these years. And like I said earlier, I can still vividly remember the conversation I had with my mom, because it was 2 days before Christmas when my father died. So that was 1997.
Oh my, how old were you?
5 years old.
Oh, when your father died.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm sorry.
Yeah, how about that for a rude awakening to life?
Yeah.
And he died in their bedroom, and I didn't see him die, but I saw him when he was dead, like a minute after. And I had to call my grandfather. Like my mom was calling the ambulance, and I was calling my grandfather. Yeah, and you have to say like, "Dad is dead." Or yeah, my father died. So after everything happened, and it was a few weeks after, and it was before school, early in the mornings, and we had just had breakfast, and my mom was upstairs brushing her teeth. So I walked up the stairs, and I don't really know why I asked, but I asked her, "Do you think God exists?" And she paused for a moment, and she said, "If he existed, why would he take your dad away?"
Oh my.
And also through Peterson, now I can understand why she said it. Like she was extremely angry at life, at everything, everyone.
Yeah.
Because her husband had just died.
Yeah.
And I don't think she knew how to handle that question.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that popped up into her mind.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, yeah, if he exists, why did he take my dad away?
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the moment I said, okay, no more.
Yeah. Yeah.
No more.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's how I lived my life. Yeah. Went to primary school, went to high school, had a literature teacher, and I don't know how one class of his, I don't know how we got to the subject, but we were talking about religion, and he pointed out all these logical inconsistencies. Let's say had a virgin birth, and Cain and Abel, and now you can't make babies with two men, and the resurrection, and I was like, yeah, that's what I always believed. And it's all made up. Look at these silly stories. How can anyone believe this? And yeah, and even through college, never paid any attention to it. And so, no, I think I was about 22 when I first started realizing that I was struggling with depression. Kept it hidden for a little over 2 years. And that's when I found Jordan Peterson on the Joe Rogan podcast. And I was listening to the guy for like 2 hours, and I was fascinated by what he was saying. And then like 2 hours into the conversation, he said, "Oh, but I'm deeply religious." And I paused the video and I thought, oh no, it's one of them. So I was sitting there, and I clicked the video. I exited the video, and I shook my head, and I was thinking, did I just waste 2 hours of my life listening to the silly religious guy? And then I was thinking, like, I've been fascinated by every word he said, by everything he explained.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I let something like that change my mind?
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to the video, and then he started talking about his lecture series, Maps of Meaning, on his YouTube channel. Didn't really start paying attention to that at first. We really first went through all the political stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was out of material, so I started watching the Maps of Meaning lectures, and
Mm-hmm.
he was. I've never had a teacher like that. He was laying all these layers on top of each other, and he was like he was giving a psychology lecture with neuroscience and biology and politics, and everything was interwoven. And yeah, that's when I just started following him like hardcore, watch everything he did. And so when he did his biblical lectures, yeah, that's what I said. I've rarely been fascinated like that by anything else. So I think because of the YouTube algorithm, I saw your commentary, so I clicked on it, and that's maybe a funny story, because I first saw your face, I didn't saw your name yet, and I thought, oh, he has a really Dutch face. And then I saw your name, and it was like Paul van der Klee. I think, is this guy Dutch? And then you started speaking English. I thought, no, maybe it's like he comes from immigrants, like Dutch immigrants. And then you explained the story, so yeah.
Yes, it's true. Yes, it's true.
But yeah, that was also like a really nice addition to everything what he was doing, and yeah, literally blew me away. And ever since I've been making so much progress, and I never knew, like, even Western society, how it was built upon Judeo-Christian values and traditions. I never knew any of that stuff, and a part of you feels like you've been cheated, or something has been taken away from you.
What do you mean by that?
Because there was never any focus on it during primary school, high school, college. I never heard any of those stories. I never knew what built the Western world. Yeah, you hear all these Marxist theories and postmodern commentaries and such. That's basically college. So you start believing them. So I never heard that worldview, and and then the addition with the biblical lectures, it was really, I barely have words for it, because it still amazes me today.
Yeah. So it sounds, so you really caught your interest, but you're and so you're living as if, but the sense is you can't feel it. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, that's true.
Have you tried reading the Bible for yourself?
I've read some chapters of Genesis.
Okay.
And I wrote some of them down in my essays from the biblical lectures.
Okay.
And I started rereading the essays I did.
Okay.
Yeah, in preparation for this talk, and like it was last week, and I started reading. I believe it's John 1.
Okay. Yeah. That's where it talks about the logos.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God was the Word.
Right.
And when I read that, I was by myself, and shivers went down my spine. And I had this really, really weird feeling in my stomach, like I got goosebumps, and it really shook me. Like, and Peterson has talked about it with music, and like you don't get excited about specific notes, or they have to be in a certain order, or there's a certain melody to it.
Yeah.
And I felt the same with these 3 lines, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you as if you're part of something that's bigger than yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's I think the first time I really felt something while reading it. And I don't understand everything of it.
You read it your whole life and you won't understand everything of it.
No, and that's great, because it still fascinates me, even if I don't understand it. It's because it's also my work. I'm a data analyst.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really rational, and I'm trying to figure everything out and looking for solutions. And so I have to, that's how my mind works. I have to understand everything, because otherwise I'm not satisfied. I'm not happy. I'm feeling frustrated with myself. And with this, it's like, I don't understand much of it, but yet I'm fascinated by it. And when I read it, I feel something like, I really have a hard time putting it into words. But yet, when I, for instance, when I just live my life, when I drive to work, when I start my computer, even when I look outside the window, there's nothing that I feel or experience like it's all matter. It's all materialism. Yeah. And that's why I somehow can't connect these two parts of me.
Right. That's, if you listen to someone like Ian McGilchrist, Peterson did a conversation with him. He comes up a lot in the conversation. He talks about the right and the left brain, and basically the right brain is the big picture side, and the left brain is the accountant side. And it, when you describe your experience, it very much sounds like those two sides are at war in some ways.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking lately. Like, I've been so left brain oriented for most of my life.
Yeah.
I like the order and the rational part, and I am starting to think completely other thoughts and feelings, and it really messes me up.
When you say it messes you up, describe that for me. Frustration, dissatisfaction.
Frustration mostly, because like I said, I can't connect these two, and I keep thinking about it, and I try to make arguments for both sides, and even like I wrote in the email, like I've been an atheist all my life, and then YouTube comes along, and I find Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, and they start debating these religious people, either Christians or Muslims, and they make these arguments. And at that point, I was really into it, and I was like, look at these idiots. How can't they see these logical inconsistencies and all these strange stories? And that's how I view religion. And now when I look at those debates Sam Harris did with Jordan Peterson, and I think these arguments are so incredibly hollow. There's nothing to them. It's just Sam Harris isn't even scratching the surface. Peterson is building all these layers on top of each other. And I was just thinking today, like his biblical lectures, it's like 40 hours worth of material. And I really doubt if Sam Harris watched all of it before he started debating Peterson.
No.
Because you can't make these arguments if you go through it all. You just can't. And And I was thinking, I have, there's nothing in me that actually believes what Sam Harris is saying,
Mm-hmm.
and yet still a part of me is like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's difficult because everything or a lot around you reinforces that side. And it's, so I'm curious, when you started watching the Peterson stuff, Maps of Meaning and the biblical series, did you really feel a lift in terms of your depression? Did you really
Yeah, it
feel?
was within 6 months. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was mostly gone.
Yeah.
It was.
And so
I've
that's
also
how.
been,
Yeah.
I've also been going to therapy, but it's like when I found Peterson and the Maps of Meaning, that's when I started really getting
Yeah.
like, better is maybe the wrong word, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's when I really made progress. So I was making some decent progress, but when I found the biblical lectures, or I started watching them, that's when I really skyrocketed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
yeah,
now what to do? Because he's not doing
yeah,
the biblical lectures. And I
no,
mean,
no.
in some ways, what Peterson, so it's interesting because in that little retrospective he did with Heinstyle,
Mhm.
he toyed with the biblical lectures and they went well. And he, to his great fortune, his book was ready to be released, and that
Yeah,
was the perfect timing for him. So he's been doing this book tour for the last year plus. He's going to do it for a year and a half. And what that effectively did was stop the flow
yeah,
of the trajectory of the biblical material out for people like you that were like, this is really helping me. And then, well, you read the book and maybe you went and saw him when he came there, but the continued flow has been stopped. And so now you're kind of, well, where do I go to
yeah.
continue to make progress in what he got me started with? There's only so many times you can watch the biblical lectures.
Yeah, I've gone through them like twice or 3 times now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so what a number of other people have done is, well, in a sense, they've started feeding for themselves instead of having Peterson do it. And it's
Yeah,
tougher going because, when he does this stuff, he pre-digests it for you.
yeah,
But,
yeah,
that's part
definitely.
of the reason that a lot of people have, pursued church, have, but as I've said in many of the conversations that I've done, it's not so easy finding the right church. And I think probably in the Netherlands, my friend Job
Mm.
had friends he lives in a small town, and so he had friends right there, and so that was an easy thing, because if you can go with friends, if the sermon
Yeah,
doesn't hit it, or if it's, at least you've got friends there and you've got a group of people. With a lot of the people in my meetups, they'll, at least they have each other, because that community aspect is really vital, because then suddenly you're, as in your case, you're just kind of alone and isolated.
yeah,
And that's really hard on the part of your brain that saw the break in the clouds. And the other part of your brain is like, no, don't look at the break in the clouds. And then
yeah,
no, look at the break in the clouds. You feel better, don't you? And
yeah,
so I don't know. Have you seen my conversations with Job?
yeah, yeah. I watched them both. Yeah,
Okay, so my conversations with Job, and then the conversation I posted today, the conversation I did with Darren that I posted last week, in all of these cases, the individuals, they told a very similar story to you, and in order to try to continue on that trajectory that kind of the biblical series got you going with, it's really important to find some other partners to converse and explore, to really keep the journey going.
yeah,
And I'm not surprised you had that experience when you read the first chapter of the Gospel of John. I would very much recommend, even if you don't understand it, start with some of the other Gospels. For us in the West, the Gospels are usually some of the easiest parts of the Bible to read, like the book of Genesis, because it's a narrative form. You can
Mm.
start reading the book of Exodus and you'll get about halfway through, about to Sinai, and then you're going to get lost in the laws and the furniture of the tabernacle. And then it's going to be like, oh, what is this about? You get into Numbers, there's going to be some cool stories, but it's going to get even worse. So the Bible is not a very easy book to make your way through on your own. And that's part of the difficulty that you face.
That's what I've been thinking, because sometimes I have to reread several sentences and I just don't understand what it's saying.
There's this story in the book of Acts where there's a guy from Ethiopia who travels all the way to Jerusalem to visit the temple, and because he was castrated as a eunuch, he's not allowed to go in. So then he's on his way back, and God then sends he's actually one of the deacons of the church over to him, and the Ethiopian is trying to make his way through the Bible, and the guy says, "Do you know what you're reading?" The guy says, "No, I can't. I don't know what I'm reading. Somebody needs to help me understand it." And then then he starts to explain it to him. So it sounds like that's a lot of what you're facing right now.
Yeah, definitely. No, but your videos are also very helpful because they give me some new insights. And like I said, it adds another layer to the biblical lectures. But I've been really, I feel like if I'm hiding some dark secret, like nobody in my family knows that I'm struggling with these issues.
Yeah.
And I'm quite afraid to tell them because I feel they think I'm going mad or something.
Yeah.
Like how can he become religious, or how can he start believing in God? He has never done anything with it.
Yeah.
And so in the town where I live, we have several churches, most of them Catholic. There's one Protestant church, and I went there once with school class, and I've been to the Catholic churches, and I never got any feeling. Thought it was all like a bit over the top, and with all the gold and the paintings and everything. Like it's very bombastic. And we went to the Protestant church, and it was like a small church, and the pastor was very nice, and I got a good feeling. So I've been considering going, but I haven't convinced myself yet to really because I'm still, like I said, I'm still a bit afraid of going. And then I started looking at Facebook pictures of the church, and most of them are old people, and it's like, do I even belong there? I feel like a fraud in some sense, because I haven't read most of the Bible. I've read a little. I think if you put a gun to my head, I would say I'm an atheist, but I'm also not really sure about that. I'm also, I don't believe in God yet. So that's the argument I make to myself. Like, if I go, I feel like a fraud.
Well, that's kind of what Job and Frederick, who I posted my conversation today. On the other hand, it's also, since I don't know the pastor and I don't know the church, but chances are it's probably true that they won't have a problem with that.
No.
They'll probably welcome you and be really glad you're there. And so I pastor a church of mostly older people, which is very common in churches. But one of the things that I often tell younger people, and it's tough for them to kind of figure out, is that a lot of these older people have a lot of wisdom, and they might not know a lot of the things that you're facing in terms of things that they're not familiar with because of the generation gap. But at the same time, they've learned a lot of stuff in their life, and they're, in my opinion, they're often untapped sources of wisdom that many younger people don't bother to pay enough attention to. But you might try just sending an an email message or
Mhm.
dropping a note to the pastor and ask if he would meet you for coffee somewhere just to talk, to introduce yourself. If it's a small church especially, the pastor probably will. The problem with large churches is that pastors get very busy because the church
Mhm.
is big. But with small churches, usually the pastor has a little bit more time and you can get some individual attention. And
Yeah,
again,
that's a
I
great
don't
idea.
know, not all pastors are going to be the same. Pastors are just like anybody else. They've got their own
Yeah.
different issues, but it's worth a shot to just say, would you meet me for coffee just to talk? And most pastors, I think, will probably be happy to. And maybe you might find you might not hit it off with that pastor. And so sometimes people check with different pastors
Mhm.
until they find one that they kind of have chemistry with.
Like a
But
therapist.
like a
That's
therapist,
an
oh, that's very true with
yeah.
therapists too. I often tell people you might have to try a few until you really find someone that clicks for you. But because the difficulty you face is that if you're alone in this, those feelings of depression and isolation, they're not going to go away.
No, in that sense, I don't consider myself depressed at all now. Far
Good.
from it, but still, my brain keeps overthinking, and it makes me, yeah, it's like frustration that's built into me, and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, uh, I, it's very difficult to explain, but yeah.
Let me ask you a question, just for my own sake. What kinds of videos would be helpful to you, do you think? Because that's helpful for me in terms of thinking about what kind of videos I want to make. Because part of the
Hmm.
reason I do these conversations is I can sit here and make videos about what interests me all day long, but I'm really curious about you and what
No,
kinds
I
of things are
think,
helpful for
yeah,
you.
I take a lot away from the conversations
Okay.
themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because the people have. By the way, it's just amazing how many people have a story and are willing to tell their story. It's like
Yeah.
I never meet these people in real life. It's like no, everyone is busy with a day and going to work and checking their phone and their email. And I'm fascinated by these stories, and I really like listening to them. And it's everyone has different perspective, and everyone has been through so many different things themselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, that gives me a lot of insight. So I really enjoy those.
Okay.
And just the analysis you do, like the Gain style videos, and
Okay.
uh, where they talked about the Gladiator movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really fascinating, and also your addition to it. So I wouldn't change that much in the videos you
Okay.
do, because I really like the format.
Okay.
Um, no, but mostly the conversations,
Okay.
because that's what I try to do in real life, is um, trying to look how people have conversations and what they're willing to share with people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've um, I'm not really autistic, but I'm like on the spectrum, so I'm always trying to pick some little things away from people and
Mm-hmm.
how they interact with each other,
Mm-hmm.
so I can implement that in my own behavior and my own conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I do enjoy them like the most.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's really helpful to me. And I want to, part of the reason I have this link that when people email me, I just give them the link like I did
Yeah,
to you.
yeah,
And it's not always easy to get a slot. I know that, but I really love for the same reason. There's nothing more interesting in this world than other people. And so
yeah.
when
That's
people are
really true.
willing to share their stories online, I find, there's natural reluctance that we have. Well, if I just put it out there, then anybody can see it. And there's risk in that. Yeah, there's risk in that. But in my experience, most of it has been positive. And in the
Yeah,
comments
definitely.
section, I've found, because then often after I talk with someone, they will be there in the comments section. And I find people are very encouraging and very supportive and want the best for other people. There are some trolls out there, yeah, but I've found it to be surprisingly positive, so positive. So I've
Yeah, it's
really
really
enjoyed
nice. Yeah, really nice. It makes you when I watch those conversations, I walk away with a nice feeling. Let's say it's like I really enjoy two people having conversation, even if I'm not partaking in the conversation. It's like I'm sitting back and listening, and I'm taking some stuff away and making mental notes, and then I have something to do with. I can work with the next day.
Mm-hmm. I was somebody came and visited my church who had been watching my videos, and so after church we went to get a bite to eat, and we were in a fast food restaurant, and the woman in the booth next to us leans over and says, "I wish you two would talk louder because your conversation is so interesting. I'm having a hard time hearing it all." And she says, you should make videos of this and put this on YouTube. I said, I already do.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah.
Oh, it was funny.
Okay. Can you imagine? No, I've never been into those situations. That's why I think I scheduled this talk like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's wasn't really a good idea of me because I had too much time to think, and I've been through this conversation like 8 times already. And I have written down I don't know how many notes. I have my papers here, like, oh, this is what I want to talk about, and this is what I want to talk about, and my brain goes so much faster than I can express in like verbally.
Yep. So what's on your list? So what's on your list?
Let me have a look. Just a moment. Is it this? Yeah. So I've also been rewatching the commentaries you did on the debates between Peterson and Sam Harris.
Oh yeah.
And gets me all riled up because I know how hollow Sam's arguments are. And there was one video you did, I believe it was called "No World Cup for You," and Sam Harris makes this soccer analogy.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge soccer fan, so when he starts talking about it, it's like 22 men running after a ball trying to hit the net, and it's insane for people to go crazy about it, and that's when something clicked, and I thought, that's how Sam Harris views the world.
Yeah, that's right.
And everything that's going on, everything that he thinks, that he says, that he writes, it's all through that lens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's when I knew, like, his entire argument against religion, against God, it's a joke, and not the other way around.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because in that section of the video, Peterson, I think, rightly said to him, it's not just 22 people chasing a ball. It's and you understand that if you're a soccer player, that it's a sport, but it's, it's so much more, and you get this sacramentalist vision of life. I've been watching a lot of Vervaeke lately. I'm going to do some videos on him. If in a sense you're in the flow because you're realizing that, yes, we're chasing a ball and we're going to win this game, but there's lots of layers to this. There's the community between the teammates. It's so rich, and to reduce the world in that way, that in a sense turns the wine of life to water. And
yeah, exactly.
If you want to keep reading in the Gospel of John, that's that comes up soon, the wine and the water, because and I think Peterson, I've actually been thinking more about those conversations. They happened in the summer 2018, but our brains are amazing because you watch something and it gets in there, and it's like there are deep places of your brain that find something in there and just keep chewing on it,
Yeah.
And because you can't live that way, and that's maybe some of the difficulty you're having in terms of overthinking. For me, all that stuff, it's in my brain. It's kind of in the back corners. It's like a little sub office in the corner. And they just keep chewing on that. And every now and then when they get something good, they throw it back to the conscious thing when something occasions. So it's like, oh, well, that's really cool. And I guess I thought of it, but it's not, doesn't feel like me that thought of it. And it's a weird thing being a human being. But I think you're right about that about the soccer analogy. And, you know, now, not until you mentioned it, I remember that part in the video as well, because I watched those 4 or 5 times. But I think you're very much right.
Yeah, I was listening to the debates and I heard that part the first time. I didn't really notice it at that time because I was already frustrated with Sam Harris at that point. So and I started paying less attention to what he was saying. But then you did the video and I was thinking like, how can you be so reductionistic in your analysis? And if you're in a stadium with 50,000 people and someone scores a goal and the entire crowd goes mad and something is happening and it's just not neurons firing or
That's right.
I don't know.
Right.
It seems so incredibly silly. Like you can't explain everything away and reduce it to just matter. It is, and it's the same with music concerts. It's like at a certain point, like the crowd start chanting or dancing and you know it, like something else is going on. And for him to say that, it's like I started questioning, like maybe he's never felt that in his own life before. How can you can't say something doesn't exist. Let me think. Do I put it the right way? If you've experienced something, you can't say it didn't happen or didn't exist. Like the experience is real, and yeah, you can explain it away and you can reduce it to all scientific explanations, but it doesn't explain 100% of the phenomenon.
Right. A lot of Peterson's argument, it's very interesting because Peterson essentially says, okay, so you've got the World Cup and it's, you know, all these people chasing a ball. You can reduce it to that. But why are, you know, especially during the World Cup, why are millions of people emotionally invested in this to the degree that they will take significant amounts of their precious time and some of them significant amounts of their precious money to invest in these people chasing the ball? And like you said, music, you can reduce music to sound waves. Oh, music, that's just ripples in the air.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's ripples in the air. You can reduce it to that. But when you notice how those ripples are, you know, colonizing, in a sense, the world, you have to say there's a power in there that to simply dismiss, well, you can do that, but why would you then care about anything in life? Because you can do that to everything.
And that's when you get nihilistic in that sense.
Yes.
And that's what I've also been struggling with lately. It's like if God doesn't exist, what's the point? Why does it matter?
Yeah.
If we die and everything goes blank.
That's right. That's right.
Why
That's right.
Why don't I just fuck off and drink and eat what I want and don't exercise? And why do I even get up in the morning and go to work?
That's right.
Why shouldn't I stay in bed? And then you get these conflicting arguments with yourself. And that's why I'm really struggling at the moment, because I need something more to. I feel like it's unsustainable, merely living as if he exists.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm really like, show me something, let me feel something, let me experience something. And maybe the first time I really felt something, like I said, was reading the first lines of John 1. I was by myself and shivers went down my spine, and I got
when I was reading your email before, before we started talking, just to get up to speed on, remind me what I had read, when you had first wrote me. And, I did, as you were describing the nihilism, I thought you as human beings, we cannot live without a what for. And you have a deep intuitive sense that you were made for something. And even if you can't necessarily put that into words, you you must pursue it, and there's a reason for it. And so what tends to happen is, again, like Peterson mentioned with that ball, he said, yeah, but they're chasing that ball, and that ball's going to connect to a goal. Now you can look at that dynamic psychologically and say, okay, so I'm going to carry my cross up the hill, or I'm going to kick that ball towards the goal, or, I'm going to participate in this orchestra in order to make this sound. But, and doing that gives me a psychological experience of meaning. And there's like, okay, well, that's good. That's good. That's kind of the small orientation. But, the book of Ecclesiastes says, on one hand, it's all this meaningless, and it's in the book of Ecclesiastes. You should read that book in the Old Testament. It's called Ecclesiastes, and it's about a guy who he was an alpha male, and he tried everything. And so he built great buildings, and he studied, and he became learned because he read books, and he had water projects, and he had a harem, so he had lots of women, and he had everything that that most men want. And he looks at all of this stuff and he says, meaningless. And in chapter 3, there's a very famous poem in there about there's a time to live and a time to die. And the Byrds made a song of that in the 60s. And then right after that, there's a section where it says, and God put eternity in the hearts of man. And that's such an interesting line, because what it says is that I can chase the ball towards the goal, and I'll have an experience of meaning in doing that. And at the end of it, I might then have the Sam Harris experience saying, I lived my life chasing a ball. And, kind of the, Tom Brady, who now just won his sixth Super Bowl, after he won like his second or third, I have a quote somewhere and you can Google it, began to ask questions of, well, okay, so I've won the Super Bowl. What does that mean? In other words, these small experiences of meaning must scale all the way out and point all the way out to an ultimate that is far larger than we are. And so when I listen to you talk, I think, and that's exactly what happens in terms of a church community, and in terms of participating in a Christian community where there's worship, because we begin to connect with something outside of ourselves and outside of time. Because you're right, you can say, okay, I'm going to sort myself out, so I'm going to set up goals, and then you have a hard time hitting goals at first, but then you start making your goals. It's like, good, I can make my goals. But at some point you begin to say, all of these goals must point to something and connect to something ultimate. And unless there's that connection, I will no longer gain the satisfaction out of these short-term goals. And I think that's what in the book of Ecclesiastes talks about, in terms of God has put eternity into our hearts, because eternity isn't just a reference to time, it's a reference to everything and the ultimate. And so that's why playing soccer can be sacramental in a certain way, because it's not just playing soccer. You are tasting something of, C.S. Lewis would say, you are tasting something of another world, that you are, and I don't know if you've read much C.S. Lewis. He might be someone to put on your list.
I've read the Narnia. Okay,
good. But like Mere Christianity is often a first book that people read of Lewis, and like Job was arguing with Lewis while he read it, which is fine. But at some point you begin to realize that playing soccer in this world is actually pointing to what is beneath soccer. And I think this is why. So you have a league and you have teams, and then at the end of the season, often then you'll have an all-star game, and there's something that's deeply fulfilling to us about that all-star game, because while we're watching people play, we get the sense, boy, what if we put the best players all on one team? And then you do that, and then you start to think, okay, but what if we put the best players from the 60s and the best players from the 70s and had them? And so you play computer like Madden football, or I'm sure there's,
FIFA,
FIFA soccer. And then via the computer algorithms, we can start to have, Pele versus, all these other people of all these, and we find that satisfying. And actually all of these things are pointing to what I think Christianity talks about in terms of this great cloud of witnesses, an eternal game, that when we're playing soccer or playing music, we are actually beginning to tie into an eternal game that, just like in the last battle in C.S. Lewis's Narnia series, farther up and farther in. And Aslan says to the children, you tasted Narnia, and what you loved about Narnia was the true Narnia that you could smell in the grass and taste in the fruit. And that's why we love soccer, because it's not just psychological for the moment, it's something far deeper in us. And we will be seriously dissatisfied because we have eternity in our hearts, if we don't have a sense that my playing soccer here isn't connected to a far greater game, that in fact my working on this game is inviting me to play further up and further in. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does, because then you're talking about like abstractions, abstract ideas.
That's right.
And okay, let's say you can explain love, for example, and you can explain it in a scientific way, and you can explain joy or anger, etc. What about potential? You can't explain potential. There's nothing scientific about it. Yeah, we all act it as if it's real. We know it's real, because if I go to the gym today, I can make a certain progress. I can have a certain body type I want in let's say in three months. That's the potential, and we all act as if it's real, and it is real. But you can't. Where's the science behind that? Yeah, and that's why and that's where I ran into trouble with the material of it's all matter.
Right.
And that's when I think there's something else beyond it. And it's the same with consciousness. They call it a hard problem in science. Well, I think that's an understatement, because there's so much they can't explain. They have no grasp on what consciousness is, and they try to explain it away with it's a byproduct of the brain or a larger brain, but then it's like how the brain is folded, and like, but something else is going on. And that's when I get so frustrated, and that's when I have these arguments in my head, and I want to, but I can't. And I see these arguments, and yet there's still this doubt in the back of my mind that says it's all matter. It's all just the way it is, like how it has been explained to you since you were 5 years old. And that's when I get frustrated, desperate, and
so one of the things. So when I see, as a pastor, when that voice in my head gets too strong, it gives me a real problem, because suddenly then on a very existential level, I can get into trouble in terms of how can I preach to these people when I've got that voice in my head. And so actually that's part of the reason that a number of years ago I started reading C.S. Lewis's book Miracles about once or twice a year. and I would just keep going through it, because what Lewis did for me was help give me some rational arguments that were undermining some of these, because there's a little voice in my head saying exactly what you're saying. And it's saying, but it's, and I just keep reducing things that way. And what that does is it turns wine to water. And now soccer is 22 people chasing a ball, and music is just stuff in the air. And one of the interesting things about Lewis was that he had this idea, I guess it's a German word, Sehnsucht, which for him was kind of a nostalgic longing, kind of a sorrowful, nostalgic longing for joy. And so where he finally went was that he saw this as, this is the hunger for him that kept pointing him further up and further in order to continue to live his life in a way that helped him believe that the myth was true. That, because his argument was that, there are plenty of myths of dying and rising gods in the world. And what J.R.R. Tolkien, so have you read Tolkien?
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings? Okay.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, read that some more. That'll help too. Tim Keller, who's a pastor in New York City, I mean, he read Tolkien almost continuously. He almost read it devotionally, because that's part of the reason Tolkien wrote that book, because he recognized that for those of us living deeply within a secular world, that voice in the back of the head just keeps gnawing at us, and we need something else to gnaw back. And for some reason, fantasy is really good at that. And just like you say, for soccer and for music, why is everybody crazy for Tolkien and Harry Potter? And there's something there. And even Sam Harris's daughter is running around in a Batgirl costume, and it's like, Sam, if you really want to raise a good atheist, you better knock that out of her.
Yeah, it's like, don't they see their own, I don't know the right word, of the correct word. Well, doesn't matter. But what did I want to say? Well, I'll just move on to my next subject.
Okay.
Well, yeah, for instance, about consciousness and trying to explain it scientifically, then there's all this evidence regarding, like, say, near-death experiences, like mystical experiences, psychedelic experiences. And then you get in a really tricky area regarding science, because it doesn't explain anything. And there's too much evidence to ignore it. Too much evidence to push it away and say it's all just in your head. Because there are so many commonalities between all these stories. And I'm really aware of what I want to believe and what I should believe, or at least I'm a data analyst. I look at the data, so I have to be rational about it. But when I look at a data set and there's so much commonality and so much of the same patterns repeating, then there's something there. Even if you purely look at it statistically. For instance, like I've read it was a conservative estimate, about 20 million people in America should have had a near-death experience in their life. And if 20 million people have something, that's quite a lot. There's more people than live in the Netherlands, for example. And I'm really hesitant to believe all these stories, but if you look at all the commonalities, and there's also a part of consciousness we don't understand. And then they try to, for instance, a common facet of the NDE is the out-of-body experience. And there's certain parts in the right side of your brain you can stimulate, so you can trigger like the out-of-body experience. But it doesn't explain why but it's not an explanation of why these things happen, and
Right.
do these actually happen to the people who are experiencing out of body experiences. You have numerous like boxers, for example, or other fighters, or even football players. They talk about, they see themselves from like an eagle perspective.
Yep.
There's you can't research it, you can't test it if that part of the brain is stimulated. So that explanation doesn't work. And for the near-death experience, there's like 20 scientific explanations, and none of them are working in every sense of the experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's when I really get like I said, I'm hesitant to believe it, but still there's something that tells me there is something more to the problem solving consciousness we experience on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
mystical experience are as old as humankind,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been recorded throughout history,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been studied, and people often tell stories of encountering the same beings, the same energies. And it's like people can't make this stuff up, even when it's like done separately. If I tell something and you tell something, and we tell like a story that correlates for 40%, something is going on, and I just can't wrap my head around it. And it's like, and then you get to the atheist, reductionist, materialist arguments, and it really frustrates me, because I really want to know and I want to believe it, and yet there's something that also tells me that it isn't true. And that's when the rational part of my brain starts saying like everything is a joke, and if we die, that's it, and and everything we experience is just a byproduct of our brain activity. So like I said, it's these conflicting things in my brain that just keep going around and around, and I can't seem to settle on one side.
I think part of what happened in the history of the West, that we began to associate belief with our desire and our capacity to control and to imagine we can see through something. Because, I mean, you're exactly right. What we face with a lot of these outlier experiences, near-death experiences. I'm right now reading Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, which is on psychedelics. I'm really enjoying that book. It's a fascinating book. But near-death experiences, how to change, psychedelic experiences, all of these ideas. In my opinion, the rational approach to these ideas, and again, you can find this in C.S. Lewis in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when Lucy comes out of the wardrobe and she says to her brothers and sisters, there's a snowy land on the other side of the wardrobe. And Edmund has gone through there, but he's done something wrong, so he's feeling guilty, so he's denying it. And Peter and I forget the other, Susan. Peter and Susan have to make up their mind about what's on the other side of the wardrobe based on testimony. And Peter wants to dismiss Susie because, well, at that point you should ask, why does Peter want to dismiss Lucy? Well, it's basically groupthink, that the whole group has said wardrobes have wooden walls at the back of it. There's no, and then they go to the professor, and the professor says, well, let's use logic. And they say, well, how so? And he says, well, who between Edmund and Lucy is more likely to lie? And Peter says, well, Edmund, that's easy. Well, then why do you doubt Lucy? Well, because Yeah, no. So why do you doubt Lucy? You doubt Lucy. There are, if you're going to play the game of suspicions, we should turn that game around and look at ourselves suspiciously and say, why do we want to doubt Lucy? Is it just out of sheer terror that there might be a wintry land beyond the wardrobe? Because I probably don't want there to be a wintry land beyond the wardrobe. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want there to be forces in the universe, personalities and powers that have more power than I have, and that might want malicious things and might want to do me harm. I do not want to believe that. Well, okay, well, there's motivated reasoning. So you're exactly right in that you look at these things, and at some point, you have to be able to honestly say, I don't know. And as a Christian, I've seen Christians play this game a lot too. Christians play this game. So here's all these rough edges of Christianity that maybe Christianity doesn't have a good answer for. Some of them are very obvious, like ghosts, or people have experiences, and then pastors.
There was also something I wanted to mention. It's like these science type people, they like to push away everything, like, say, religious people say. Yeah. Like, if science can explain it, the religious people tell, oh, it's God. What the scientists don't understand is they do exactly the same, but then it's dark matter and dark energy. If they can account for something in the universe, then it must be dark matter, then it must be dark energy. And they don't seem to understand that they make the same, perhaps mistakes is the wrong word, but
they make the same move.
Yeah, the same move, exactly. And from an outsider's perspective, it's quite easy to point that out. It's like, it's totally different if you're arguing with someone or having a debate with someone, but like, you're doing exactly the same thing as you're accusing these people of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's when I think, like, just say, I don't know, or we have to research this further, or something like that. And I can understand that perspective, because I've done exactly the same, and I think most people have. If I don't want to believe something, then I just say it didn't happen, or it isn't true. But if you start looking into these things, it's like there is something to it. Maybe there's something else going on, but you can't deny it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If you have a country, let's say the Netherlands, we have 17 million people. If everyone has a blue skin, it's not just a fabrication of the mind. It's everyone has something. And if 20 million people, and that's a conservative estimate, have these experiences, something must be going on.
Yeah.
At least have the guts to admit it and to research it. But then again, you get into the scientific world, and you get into these, they have those established models of interpreting things, and then it's getting quite shaky in and of itself. But simply denying it, yeah.
Well, and that's the irony of a guy like Rupert Sheldrake. Whatever you think about what he does, he has a point when he says, hey, when the constants of the universe vary like the speed of light and big G gravity, science says, well, let's ask questions about that. That's actually the scientific move, to say, I don't know, let's investigate. And so maybe there is a winter wood behind the wardrobe. And in many ways, what the children do in terms of going through the wardrobe, well, that's what to do. That's how you investigate it.
Yeah, and it's like, it's equally scary in that sense. It's like blank,
yes!
blank forever, like nothing forever. Well, that isn't like a prospect I'm looking forward to. but imagining that there is something else beyond our conscious experience, yeah, that terrifies me as well.
That's right.
So it's like, I don't know what I want, and you can't choose, because you don't know for certain. but I'm also not sure what I would want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I believe you said in one of your videos of your father died several years back, I believe.
Yeah. 6 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and if he suddenly came into the room, yeah, if my dad just walked into the room right now, I would freak out. It's like, do you want to experience that? It's like your mind will be literally blown at that moment, and
Yeah.
nothing of your cognitive structure or your mental capability can handle something like that.
That's right.
So we don't know how it would be like on the other side, if there is a other side.
That's right.
So that's also something I'm
Yeah.
struggling with.
There's a world of questions. Often, you know, when I listen to some of and I don't want to be too critical of the celebrity atheists, but when I listen to them sometimes, I think, you imagine Christians are small-minded people trying to buffer themselves from a big world with small, narrow ideas.
Yeah.
But the things, the likes of which you just said, yeah, it's actually what something like Christianity wants to produce in you is faith that, okay, I know enough. If you read the Bible thoroughly, you begin to get the sense that you know enough to realize that we little human beings are really bad masters of the universe. We do a really bad job of it. We're not good to each other. We're not even good to ourselves. We don't know what we want. That's the truth about us. Yeah. And so, okay, so maybe God is a sky daddy that I'm projecting into the universe out of my fears. All right, that's an argument. I'll listen to that, but maybe not. And it doesn't seem like most of humanity, when you make that argument, now you've basically made one of the most obnoxious elitist moves in all of human history that basically says the vast majority of humanity are just fearful idiots.
Yeah.
And you in this little time and space are somehow the master of the world. And the problem is that I've seen a lot of people who have acted like masters of the world, and their track record is not good. I would much rather be someone with a lot more humility that can say, I don't know. This is what I know. This is what and we use this word believe. This is what I think. Every day I've got to make choices about my life. I need to make them based on something. I need something to guide me. This is the best track record I see. I'm going with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and in that sense, faith is quite a sophisticated idea for supposedly primitive people.
That's right.
Like you just don't come up with something like that out of nothing.
No.
It seems really strange to me, like it's something people made up just because of fear of death.
Yeah. Yeah.
That in itself seems like a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
At least.
And then if you say, well, fear of death is that strong. Well, why do soldiers go to war? Are they terrified of death? Yes. Yet, you look at, say, the American Civil War, or any war, that they stood in a line, for Pete's sake, shoulder to shoulder with guns, and it's like, who had courage to do this? Well, what motivated them? Well, okay, nationalism. Okay, well, there's a powerful thing that can overcome fear of death. And then you begin to say, this easy, dismissive approach to the rest of your species is really not, as Peterson said in those things, it's really not taking the whole picture into account. And furthermore, I don't think it actually, this is C.S. Lewis's point in his book, Abolition of Man, it doesn't actually create the kind of human beings that can actually accomplish the kind of civilization that we live within. If our ancestors thought like these people, we wouldn't have video games and Cheetos to waste our time with.
No, we definitely don't.
Because why? Just,
Yeah.
and that's why I listen to them. And I don't, part of, when earlier when you were talking about, listening to Sam Harris, there is a psychological thing that happens when, we listen to others and we can dismiss their point of view. We have we get, I don't know the psychology, we get a dopamine rush or something that we feel superior to someone. It's basically a status rush. And we ought to be suspicious of that too. If we're going to be suspicious, and rightly so, of, well, what kinds of motivated reasoning are leading me to create stories that will make me feel better, we ought also to be a little suspicious of what kind of motivated reasoning are leading me to have dopamine rushes to feel superior to everyone. On one hand, I'm playing a psychological game to deal with fear. On the other hand, I'm playing a psychological game to boost my sense of superiority and status over others. That's all games. I can see through both of those games. Yep. So I should probably doubt both of them. So, and so then I want to be careful about not being too dismissive of someone like Sam Harris, because then I can just as easily fool myself in that way. So the better posture is actually the more difficult one of humility, of listening, of when I think someone, maybe if they're even anti-Christian and they have a good argument, to say, that's a good argument. I'm going to have to think about that. But the real strange thing is you need to have a certain base in your heart to be able to doubt yourself in all those productive ways. And to get back to some of the things we first started talking about, if we think about, let's say, Jonathan Haidt and the elephant and the rider, a lot of what we should do as riders is think about, how can I train the elephant? And for me, that's where I always come back down to church, because people come into church and like, well, you sing songs to Jesus and you close your eyes and you pray to this guy and you read out of this old book and you do all this crazy stuff. And part of me totally gets how crazy the whole thing looks. I'm secular enough to totally get that. But on the other side, I say, yeah, but how are you training your elephant? Well, I play video games 20 times. I play video games 12 hours a day. Well, that's training your elephant. What are you training your elephant to be? Because at some point you might want to say, okay, well, I got, somewhere probably between 60 and 80 years to kick around on this planet. Do I want to do something that's worthwhile? Well, that's going to mean, just like you said, it's going to mean learning to doubt yourself and going to the gym and reading a book and playing computer games. That's good too. But, within a healthy diet of other things, and then building relationships. And so then you look at, well, what has helped people throughout the years actually accomplish something in their lives? Well, religion has been for most of human history, has been a big part of it. Yeah. So you're going to turn your back on that? What are you going to replace it with? So those are hard questions.
Yeah, then it's nihilism.
Yeah.
It's hedonism. And one of the most popular TED videos is of Sam Harris. It's like, science can explain morality. And when I see it, I keep thinking, no, it can't. It's the same. Time and again, he makes the same argument, and you clearly see it in the debates with Peterson, and it's like, there's so many more layers to it. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. So now I've decided for myself, I get really frustrated listening to Sam Harris. I'm not going to do that anymore. Because
we have 5 more minutes. Any last things you really want to get in before I have to move on? Because you saw the next guy popped in, so I always forget to lock the room. So then the next guy comes in, it's like, there's not supposed to be people here.
Let me have a look. No, I did have this dream a while back, and I'll keep it short. because there was lots of things happening in the dream. But I came out of a kitchen and I was looking at a large wall full of ornaments, and I couldn't make out any of them. They were all just vague, they were blank. But in the middle of this wall was a small wooden cross. And it was the only thing that stood out to me, and it really called to me. And to my left was a staircase leading towards a dark basement. And to my right was a balcony, and I overlooked like a really strange, like a canteen or some sort, and there was a battle going on. And something to my left down in the basement said God was there, and he was calling for me. And I stood looking down at the basement, but I was too afraid to go down. So I went to my right and I started fighting monsters and robots and all kinds of creatures. So I think that's quite descriptive of my current situation. What I'm facing now is like something is calling me, but I have to fight that battle first, because before I can allow myself to believe, to have faith. That's my interpretation of it. And then I'm aware of things, of dreams, and the willingness to interpret them. But I woke up and there was no conscious thought into it. There was no action into it. I woke up and that was the first thing that popped into my mind, like it's trying to tell you something. So that's also that's what I thought. It was really descriptive of, it is really descriptive of my situation now. So I still have to fight the battle, and I hope eventually I can find God.
Well, he finds you.
Yeah,
that sounds like
true.
he's already hunting. So that's what Lewis says. Lewis talks about he's a warrior. He hunts us, but he doesn't hunt us so that we would be his prey. He hunts us so that we would be his bride. That's a look up. There's a really cool look up the Hound of Heaven on YouTube. I've seen some really interesting videos about that old poem. You might enjoy it.
I'll look it up.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis. I think that's a great way to end you sharing your dream.
Thank you.
Now, before you said that you probably wouldn't have reservations with me sharing this. Do you want to see it before I share it? Or...
No, just put it on YouTube, because I already know I have made a fool of myself.
You have not. I think this has been a wonderful conversation, and just by virtue of having many other conversations with people like you, I think others will benefit from it. And again, one of the real beauties is that this crazy thing called a comment section, which in my case has so many wonderful people in it. They will. It's just so cool to have 100 people being able to come in and encourage you, or to give a book recommendation, or give their little piece of advice or something. It's just such a cool thing. So I think it's great. So
yeah, that's really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dennis. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
Take care. Good luck.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Bye.